Friends, welcome into another edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast. I'm Alex Parra. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being part of our world and making us part, a little part at least, of your world. Something that we always hope that you can contribute. Please find us in social media and send us your questions. Before we start, yes, it's not only Uncle Alex, but more importantly, the two that you see now joining us. I'll introduce the lady first. Welcome, all of you, our dear friend, Laura Gomez. First of all, Laura, how are you? Happy day, happy Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday night, morning, whatever it is, whenever you're listening. How are you, Laura?
I'm doing all right. It's been a long month, a long week, I would say. But we're hanging in. You know how that meme says, the horrors persist, but so do I, or like something like that. I don't know, bad joke, but it was funny when I saw it. It reminded me of what's going on.
Well, Laura, I know you like holidays. I know that
I do.
Halloween is done, the spooky
Yes.
holiday. But are you ready for what's coming with the Turkey Day and then, of course, Xmas?
Yeah. But in my household, Thanksgiving is only celebrated one day. So on November 1st, I'm Christmas. As you can see, I'm already in that Christmas,
We noticed.
ambient, and that's what I'm feeling. I need extra serotonin this year, so I just went ahead and started everything earlier. So I'm just watching like these Christmas movies on repeat and like trying to avoid the real world at this point, besides soccer.
You know what? 2 months of Christmas movies is a little too much for me. I'll be honest with
No,
you, Laura.
no, drink eggnog with them, and you're gonna be fine.
Well, the drinking, that's what gets me through the holidays, to be honest with you. So
There you go.
I like that. Also, you can see in between Laura and myself, we welcome in the one and only Victor Araiza. Victor, good afternoon, good day, good morning. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Alex. A pleasure to be on here again with you, with Laura. For those of us listening a little bit late, but we are recording on Veterans Day, so just wanted to extend that happy Veterans Day to all.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We really thank all of the people that have sacrificed of themselves for their families, for our country. And after this election, guys, the last time we were recording, we were on the cusp of an election. We now know the results. Maybe we start there just to kind of shake things up a little bit. It looks like a red wave in many ways. Victor, were you surprised by the results? I'll start with you. Whether you voted one way or another, you can keep that to yourself, but certainly for many a surprise, especially that Latino men, I'm hearing, I'm reading, I'm seeing, that would be 2 out of the 3 on the screen, potentially supported Trump. That's a bit of a surprise, Victor.
It is and it isn't. I think, it was hard to call because it's hard to say which side of the aisle people are these days. And not that, I've always believed, one of those like old rules, right, where you keep politics to yourself a little bit. And I know lately it's sort of turned into sports, but I think there's a lot of Trump supporters that don't say they are. And then you kind of find out in this election, which is usually what elections turn out to be. Listen, I've always been about, we respect the vote of the nation. This is how it's been decided, and let's just hope for the best.
Let's hope for the best. A lot of questions certainly out there about what will happen with the border, deportations, the international aspect of what we're going through in so many parts of the world. And we're getting what? He was 45. Now he'll be 47. We're talking about Donald Trump. Just by your reaction, Laura, I can tell that you're not necessarily happy with the outcome.
Well, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as a woman in general, it's just a hard, honestly, a pill to swallow. And, with Victor, I know that we grew up kind of like during the same age where reporters and journalists really kind of keep who they like vote for, what they, their personal things kind of like, kind of hidden and more personal. But honestly, for me, it's really hard to keep kind of those things for sure personal, just because, there's a lot of things that affect me as a woman and as an immigrant. So, and it's hard for me to say, women could do everything and women should be in sports and we deserve our spot, and then go with, obviously a party that is trying to take away a lot of the women's rights. So it's difficult. And like Victor said, I mean, what are you going to do now? You have to respect what everybody kind of voted and what they did. But I'm always for women's rights, for immigrant rights, because I am one, and I've made this country great. So, I mean, it's tough. We'll see what happens.
I thank you for those comments, Laura, and I share many of them in many ways. I think a woman's right to choose what's best for them, their reproductive rights shouldn't be a question. Period. To be honest with you, and what does that mean relative to abortion? I don't know if we'll go into that in this format, in this forum, but I do know that a lot of women and a lot of men are concerned. We talked about deportations, and what does that look like for the Latino community, Laura, before we started recording today. And it could be something that's very, very complicated. It's something that could potentially also get out of hand. So, yeah, let's see what happens. My hope, Victor, my hope, Laura, my hope, friends, is that we find a way to continue united. And I still fundamentally believe that the parties, I still fundamentally believe that the media tend to want to separate us. There's so much more we have in common. Our values, who we are, the respect, empathy, that we shouldn't worry too much in the sense of if we stick to those values, guys, I think we can move forward. But anyway, we could go on and on about the politics, friends. I'm sure that's not why you tuned in to listen to us today, talk about politics. But why don't we start with something that is maybe equally, and there was a joke about this, right, Victor? That deportations have already started.
Yeah, it's on both sides of both our languages, English and Spanish.
Exactly.
It seems to be a running meme.
A running meme because Hector Herrera, HH, is no longer part of the Houston Dynamo and for now not part of MLS. Laura, did it come to you as a surprise? We knew this was an option year, and we'll talk about what Pat Onstad, the general manager of the Dynamo, explained relative to the questions that you had, Victor, that I had a few regarding the departure, the non-extension, the non-continuation of Hector Herrera. I guess the first question, Laura, to you is, was that a surprise to you that he's not staying?
No, it wasn't. I think that we were kind of picking up on like little subtle things that, we were like, oh, I don't know. It kind of seems that they haven't offered anything. They haven't really, most of the times when they're such big players, they're one of the first ones to really sign and make a big deal out of it, especially, the Dynamo with their PR and things like that. I don't know. I think it was a combination of perhaps how much money he's being paid and he did a lot, honestly. Like, he made the team really kind of wake up and shake things up, but perhaps it's not what they were looking for the payment that they were giving him. So I kind of saw that, he had a lot of injuries. He was kind of inconsistent. He had a really great year last year, but the one before, like half the year that it wasn't that great. This year wasn't that great. So, there was little things here and there that were pointing that perhaps he was not going to sign, because I don't think he's the kind of player that's going to accept any money less to stay in, Houston and MLS. So, and age perhaps can play a thing in that too.
And Victor, was it a surprise to you? I think there were hints, as Laura has mentioned, that this wasn't going to continue. Even I think if the team went all the way, maybe that would have been the only way to justify keeping him for the Dynamo to win a championship. Victor?
I think so. I think a deeper playoff run would have inspired Hector Herrera, would have probably made more of a difference. But I think, from all the sporting reasons, it seemed like it was going to happen eventually. I thought maybe he'd stick around for one more year because of, while he did take it easy in 2024, I think there's still some value that you could take out of an Hector Herrera out of a full season. Maybe they just cast too much doubt, right? Because of all time missed. But if you look to 2023, he's never going to have that season again. But if you could find a sweet spot, right? I think he's certainly a player that still brings a different quality, right? A game-changing quality at his best. And little things that don't get shown on the stat sheet. I know obviously the assist was a big deal in 2023, but working with players, asking them to provide, faster touches, crisper, right? during warm-ups, during training. And again, maybe because he was missing in some of the trainings throughout this year, you didn't really get that as much. But he was almost like having a coach on the field, right? And I always did think he didn't truly fit the system of Olsen. And I think, from everything we heard, especially with the press conference the day after with the GM Pat Onstad, it's all in on Benny Ball now. And it doesn't sound like they're going to replace him with a DP. And it just kind of, we can get into that. But as far as fitting into the system, I did think, I thought in a joking way, right? Oh, first chance Olsen gets, so he's out. And I, now kind of seeing it, it's like, I guess, because he was the only thing standing in Olsen's way to playing full out Benny Ball. He was a player that really made you attack a little bit more. Again, directed players on the field, helped create some of those great attacking surges that you saw, especially throughout 2023, that inspired the team to an Open Cup title, that went into a lengthy playoff run. Taking into account all the way they play and I'll say it, the talent they're lacking on the attacking side, especially, in the front, maybe front three, front five, however you want to put it. But we'll see. We'll see, because you don't have another Hector Herrera on the roster.
So, Victor, Laura, will the lasting image of Hector Herrera be him spitting on a referee at Shell Energy Stadium? Is that the memory that we leave here? Look, you're talking, Victor, about finding numbers. Okay, he didn't play in X amount of numbers. He had a good season in 2023, a reasonable season. But he was absent. Part of the discussion, conversation, explanation that Pat Onstad gave was that he wasn't meeting certain standards, certain numbers relative to his participation, meaning being available to be on the field. If you recall,
part of this, if I can add, because it is an important detail, Onstad made it clear, not in how many games or how many minutes, so we don't have a finite number,
right?
But there was a clause in his contract that he could have played himself into the option and essentially triggered it for 2025.
Milestones that were contractually there, if I'm not mistaken.
At least that's what was explained to us by the general manager. So you could say, in a way, it was in his hands, and he just, the player didn't complete it. But I did think it was an MVP-like season in 2023. At least if you compare him to other players around the league, he had a big impact. He won't get the credit, and he hasn't to this day gotten the credit that he deserves, because lack of media coverage, what have you. But he did at least start to turn his team around, and then we'll see where they go from here.
But let me go back then to that specific question. Is Laura the image of Hector Herrera spitting toward a referee at Shell, is that what his legacy leaves us? Because other than winning a U.S. Open Cup, and that's something, he didn't pick up any titles. He didn't move the needle when it came to attendance. We'll talk about off the field here shortly. Is that what people are going to remember, unfortunately? Fortunately? Your thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the only thing they're going to remember. I think that they are going to appreciate the kind of new blood that he did bring for the seasons that he was here in the passion and the orientation, perhaps, that the other players didn't have, bringing new things to the field that weren't there prior to him. I do think that it might leave kind of like what would have been, or what could have been with him. I think that it was kind of what a lot of people expected from him. Is kind of half full, I would say, of a cup. It's not fully fulfilled, perhaps, what he could have been. So it might leave like that sour taste of, yeah, he was good, but was he great? So that's my kind of take of what Hector Herrera left in the seasons that he was here. I mean, is he going to be memorable forever? I mean, he's going to be mentionable. I don't know if he's going to be compared to one of the greats of the Dynamo. But I think that he does deserve, like Victor said, there's a lot of lack of recognition of what he did. But I do think that he could have done more, not only on, but also off of the field, to make himself more memorable for Houston. But I don't think things went precisely perhaps what he wanted, or what the Dynamo, CEOs or presidents thought he would bring to the club.
So clearly, for many, he's accomplished. He's moved the needle on the field, Victor and Laura, as far as the last 2 years, the team making it to the playoffs. Let's talk a little bit about off the field, Victor. The signing of a Mexican national team player is something that the Dynamo, in many ways, fans in Houston, at least Mexican fans, have been saying it's a no-brainer, meaning the moment you bring a national team player to Houston, you've done it. You're going to blow it out of the water. What data now, what facts, Victor, do we have now to disprove that? And I'm using the word disprove intentionally because it didn't move the needle. Hector Herrera was still not known to many people beyond a circle, and not even all Mexican fans were here supporting the Dynamo because of Hector Herrera. I'm going to say this. The experiment of a Central American team did not pan out, either on the field success or in the stands. I say this today. The experiment of a Mexican national team player did not pan out on the field or in the stands. What does that say, Victor, if you agree with me, about Houston?
It means that they don't know these players play for the Dynamo. I go back to it. That's a big factor, the marketing. Because even going back to those days, they didn't market Albert Elise or Boniek Garcia or Darwin Seren. Some of these guys that were national team heroes for their countries, they weren't marketed, especially in their own communities here in Houston, Texas. So I think it starts there. And the difference with Hector Herrera is that compared to those other players, Hector Herrera was on a different level. You finally, if you were a salesperson for the Houston Dynamo, if you sold tickets for the Houston Dynamo, you finally had something to work with. But it did need some marketing behind it. If the team thought that just for having a Mexican passport, for playing with the Mexican national team, it was going to be an automatic, sellout every game, then they weren't studying who they were purchasing.
Right.
And I think we've spoken on it, and certainly Laura and I have in our previous podcast. Yeah.
No, Victor, I'm interrupting only because part of it was Hector Herrera available? It seemed like it was pulling teeth getting him to be available. Is this, let's say...
But you have to make him available.
Well, but my point is this. If I'm paying you that money, isn't my strategy, not only do you perform on the field, but Mr. Agent, Mr. Player, I am committing you to 10 appearances to move the needle, to sell tickets. It appears to me that did not happen.
And that's not his fault. I mean,
right.
Sure, we could ask more. You could have done more. We could say, hey, out of the goodness of your heart, why aren't you out on the local fields? But at the end of the day, I mean, that's the club's job. Like you said, that's those things should be written in the contract, agreed upon before you bring Hector Herrera to Houston. And I think when you want data or you want proof, his arrival right there, that was a marketing push, whether it's from MLS, from the team, half and half. But that was a push, that a media push that you were getting. Hector Herrera's arrival was announced. And you saw in that first season, that first half of the season that he was here, you were getting some more of a crowd in there. You got a couple sellouts, real sellouts, none of these, with some empty seats. And of course, you do have a little bit of I won't call it bad luck, but the 1 year where the World Cup isn't during the summer, right? Where it's at the end of the year or in November, at the end of the MLS season. So that sort of did bring a bit of a negative spin with the Mexican fan, right? Where Herrera was a little bit disliked for moving to MLS at the point in which he did. And then, of course, the way Mexico just went out in that World Cup, it sort of left sour grapes and that kind of messed, right? With tarnished a little bit the image he had in the Mexican community. I think had he gone on loan, and it's easy to say now, but I think had he stayed on loan with Atletico Madrid, for example, finished out in Europe, gone to the World Cup, and then arrived in MLS, I think you'd have more of the Mexican fan on board wanting to honor him. In which case, I still think there's enough Mexicans in Houston, Texas, where you can market an Hector Herrera, invite people out to games. But there wasn't a buzz around him, around this team, around the goals that he scored in that 2023 season. So I say the Dynamo have no one to blame but themselves. I mean, I know we can harp on this all you want. Look, I'll say it. They can bring a attacking star from the U.S. men's national team, and it'll be the exact same story. You'll get that initial push in the beginning, but if you don't continually market a player, advertise them, the same thing's going to happen.
Hector, I will say something, Victor, about Pat Olmstead. He did say this in quote, "We are not the Houston Texans. We are not the Houston Astros. We are not the Houston Rockets." I thought that was very telling of the mindset of where they are and what needs to be done now. I think will be part of what we talk about next. Meaning if Pat Olmstead recognizes that, I believe the team is recognizing that. And it may be hard lessons, and it may be money that was spent with Hector Herrera. Off the field, Laura, could more have been done to market Hector Herrera to move the needle and have more sellouts and more support for the team?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Victor, what he said, that the marketing is a big thing from it. And one of the things that I first mentioned, one of the podcasts that Victor and I had in the past about the Dynamo is, yes, Hector Herrera is a star, but is he a superstar? Because we all know that just saying the name Messi and you're going to have a sellout, right?
Sure.
And that's like a superstar, you know? You have other names that also can fill stadiums, but how was the Dynamo going to make HH work continuously and not just make it the flavor of the month? And now we see how it panned out. Again, the marketing was half-baked, in my opinion. I think that they could have pushed it way, way more. Was it him personally? I can't say if it was him, if he didn't want to do it. Was the sports agent, did they not write that in? Did they want less contact with the people? I don't know, because again, we don't have full transparency with a lot of things.
Sure.
With the teams. So I think that more could have been done and more consistent marketing and
Now,
more involving the community.
Laura, that said, I think you need to also give the organization credit for going after Hector Herrera, for trying to find the national team player after so many years of being in existence. And not just a Mexican player, but someone that had a legitimate name, that has a legitimate name. There's some credit to be given to the organization for that.
Is there?
I think so. They did it.
I mean, I think it's late.
They
I think
spent
it was
the money.
late. I mean, it's so many years of trying to get that done. I mean, yeah, I guess you get a little pat in the back, but I'm not going to go give them a hug and say, congratulations, you're amazing, because it was late. It's something that the people and the fans have been asking for a long time. So to me, it was really late. So that's kind of like, okay, finally you do what you needed to do.
And, it was like one of the bigger signings under the new ownership of Ted Siegel. But I will say it does come with the caveat that it was a free transfer, right? I mean, not that that takes anything away from what they paid him a year. It was about $5 million a year. But again, I go to accountability. You're paying that player that much money. I'm sorry. Ted Siegel should have pulled up in a car and said, hey, "Let's go," or hired the people to say, "Get him out there, get him in the community," or right. I'm paying this guy this much money. I'm not getting the return. Why is it? Get him out in the community. Get him out doing interviews. I don't think I ever saw him once in studio in either of the two TV channels.
So can we?
It's astounding to me.
Can we agree on something? They did not get the bang for the buck. Is that fair? Either on or off the field? I think you just said that. I'm not getting my return on this investment.
On the field, you got maybe even more than what you paid for in 2023 on the field. Okay. Because he put the team on his back. I've said it.
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
In my opinion, I know Lucho Acosta got the MVP, but for my liking, I think Herrera did more for the Houston Dynamo for what he did in 2023. Then in 2024, again, we've talked about the lack of, maybe even lack of being focused because of when he chose, especially that preseason injury, when he chose to get treatment. But the quality was there, and you know what? I go back to it. Part of him taking it easy in 2024, I think it's a product of the culture. If he tried, because he did. Remember, we heard him say that first half of season that he was here, he had doubts, and I've heard this through other sources that he did indeed have doubts of wanting to leave the team. He came back in 2023. He put it all in. In 2024, if he took it a little bit easy, if he tried and they didn't respond, and he said, you know what, fine. If they just want me to coast and collect the check, then that's what I'm going to do. And then maybe I give him that benefit of the doubt, because that culture can eat you alive. If you're trying to do something and the powers that be don't want to help you, then why should Hector Herrera care more about the Houston Dynamo if the owner doesn't?
Friends, we're on the Soccer Tejas podcast. Laura, Victor, Alex, thanks for joining us, talking about the end of the Hector Herrera era. And it has ended. 2.5 years, you might say, 3 seasons that he was involved. And we'll talk soon about what's next. I know one thing that Pat Onstead said, that they're not the team, Victor, that's chasing the CR7s, they're not chasing the multi-million-dollar designated players. They are modest in their spending, or will be, apparently. Potentially something similar. The transfer window coming up here at the end of the year might yield something. But what I'm hearing is really don't expect anything major, Victor, until the summer. So what's next for the team? Is it surviving with what they have, playing to make playoffs and make it 1 or 2 rounds in? What are the realistic expectations of what the Houston Dynamo FC will bring here in 2025?
Well, we've talked about it in some of these previous episodes. I'm not going to harp on it too much, but I said even with Herrera, I don't think they were doing enough to be an MLS contender. I think they had a few players that could get you to that point. But other things, the playing style, the lack of addressing the attack, those are things that hindered you from going and beating an LAFC and beating a Seattle Sounders. I know Pat Onstad said in his press conference they believe they can beat the team like that. They haven't proven it. They had 2 chances back-to-back in the playoffs to show that they could beat a team like that, and they didn't. And I don't know why it would be any different without an Hector Herrera. If you're not gonna have a playmaker that can win you games, I don't know if all of a sudden you're gonna give free liberty to Ezequiel Ponce, right, to be more of a playmaker, because that's probably about the only guy on your roster that has any quality and maybe determination, because we know what they've done to Sebastian Ferreira. He's burnt out. So, and by the way, he's sitting collecting $2 million again, I think, next year. So it doesn't seem like they'll be able to move him. But again, name of the game here was to make the playoffs. They make it to the playoffs. They look good. Everybody looks like things are going in the right direction. Now they got 2 years where they made it into the playoffs. Over half the league makes it in. So really all they got to do is be within the first 9, right, in the conference. If the playoff format doesn't change next year, then you know what? They probably will have enough to do that with the likes of a Coco Carrasquilla and an Ezequiel Ponce throughout the regular season. But again, I don't see them winning an MLS Cup, not unless everybody's all of a sudden down in the same year.
Laura, Victor mentions Carrasquilla, another player who's, for now, legacy of past season is the red card. But without a doubt, we know it looks like, unless something changes, he is returning. We'll see what kind of conflicts he may or may not have with the national side. What happens next for the Dynamo? On the field, off the field, Laura, in your opinion? Is it starting all over again now that Hector is gone? Is it building on what Ben Olsen has put together, and that's enough? Where do you think the team goes now?
I don't know. Like, Victor just made me depressed while recapping everything. At one point, like, I'm speechless. Honestly, it is worrisome. I think that they're going to want to build on what they already have. But to me, it's worrisome And kind of, what word would it be? It's distraught. It's embarrassing, I would say also, to say that they're not going to spend the big bucks, because one
Yeah.
of the things that they said when the new ownership came in was that they were going to do things differently from the old ownership that didn't want to invest. Now, I know that Houston Dynamo has always wanted to get the most what they can for players, but has that worked out? No. It's like not been 1 year, it's not been 2 years, it's not been 3 years, it's not been 4 years, not been five, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like you're beating the same, like to the same, what's that saying?
Beating
Beating
a
the
dead
horse to
horse.
death.
Beating a dead
Yeah.
horse. Yes. The horse is already
So
dead
it's
in that scenario.
exactly. So it's like, I mean, what results do you really expect with one of the only players? You're not only that the big marketing player that you had, but also the biggest playmaker that you had is now gone. What are you expecting to do different? And by telling us already, it's kind of like saying, you know what, suck it up. We got you the playoffs. Go to the games, guys.
Right.
What
Right.
does that say to fans? I mean, that kind of says to fans like, don't expect for us to sign big names. Don't expect us to spend money. Just come see us, make it to the playoffs, get eliminated embarrassingly in
I
the first.
Laura, I think you and Victor, and I'm not attacking you personally. I love both of you.
What, that we're negative?
No, you're being cynical because you don't believe in, and it's not based
It's
on,
not, it's
hold
not
on.
cynical.
It's cynical, but maybe that's the word I'm using. You don't believe because the history has been so consistently negative, even from one owner to the next, from one coach to the next. So I understand, and maybe many of you fans and friends that are following us in Dynamo faithful are about to give up on this. Here's where I think we're different. We, meaning this era of Houston Dynamo soccer. What Pat Onstead said to me was honest, and it's the first time I've heard someone be brutally honest about where they are. And second, I don't know Mr. Ted Siegel. We don't hang out. But someone who's successful in that way, still young and hungry. Remember, he was quoted by the mayor of Houston, which indeed led to a change in the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. That means he's involved. That means somewhat of his ego is involved, and that may be enough to start making some changes. I see surprises coming in a good way that might actually change the tone.
I hope you're right.
That might change the tone. So as much as I'm troubled by Hector Herrera leaving, which was going to run its arc anyway, Victor, am I wrong to have a little bit more optimism in what may be coming? And I think the next year or
You
two,
are.
the next year or two may prove me right or wrong. But I think those two names that I just mentioned, Pat Onstead, Mr. Ted Siegel, and the ego involved and the World Cup involved. I don't think Siegel gets rid of the team until post-World Cup. He wants his investment, yes, Victor, you and I talk about this, to grow.
You want cynical. There's your cynical.
No, Victor is
Siegel's
cynical.
in it for the money
I'm
for
a
the World
realist.
Cup. So all these moves, I mean, buying into MLS, buying into the Houston Dynamo, there you go. 2026 World Cup. You don't have to look any further to see his motivation. Why he's going to the mayor. Why did he go to the mayor? Yeah, I think it had more to do with that World Cup participation or hosting, right? And getting Shell into some of those events than the Dynamo. But, look, I get it. The benefit of the doubt, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, and I know not everybody has my scope. That's why I think different until proven wrong. But I do think, the things we did learn from the Pat Onstead interview, they're going with the 2DP, salary cap system, right? Where they're focusing a little bit more on the younger players. I don't want to get technical, but basically they're not using 3DP spots is what he said in fewer words. And you already have those in Ferreira, unless you sell them, which who's going to buy them since you haven't played them? But, unless you want to take a loss, which there I think you could prove that you're maybe a little bit more about winning, cut them loose and have that spot be open and try to go for another designated player, attacking player that way.
Sure.
Ponce, we still got to see what he can do in a full season. So I'll give you that. But then the rest of the cast, right? I think that's where, for me, the doubt lies. Where Herrera, I think, when he was on the field, made him look a little better. Now you are bringing back. Here's the options they did exercise: Franco Escobar, who I think is still a good player, can get heated sometimes, but as long as he can stay on the field, I think wherever you put him, that's how good he is. Mikael, who's grown, and I think still a cheap option for what he provides you. Gabe Siegel's dirt cheap, so he's not costing you anything to carry him. The only one I disagree with, especially because OnStat said they were trying to be fiscally
responsible.
I'm paraphrasing here, but yeah, a little bit more fiscally responsible, is picking up a Sebastian Kowalczyk, because you're paying that guy $500,000 like you are. I mean, Basi, like you are. Maybe I'm wrong on this one, Ibrahim. You got some money in these players that aren't producing. Latif Blessing's gone, I think, but that's another one where you had over, I believe, like $700,000 in this guy, and you're not playing them. You're not getting goals. Options decline. John Gregush, we didn't see much of him, right? We did at the beginning of the season. Junior Moreno, that was a pickup, former Olsen guy, right? Some of these guys might come back. We don't know. Brad Smith, I think he's been injured. Osman Silla, if I'm pronouncing that right, he was the college draft pick, played at Dynamo 2, had about 7 goals. Siegel had 10 in Dynamo 2. I think also dirt cheap. I don't know why they're not keeping him, because he seemed to be, able to fill a bit more of this system if they wanted to press for goals, but for one reason or another, not. Again, we'll see, but it looks like not coming back. Xavier Valdez, the goalkeeper, I thought he was a good prospect. Maybe they don't think he's ready yet. Mackenzie Gaines is a free agent. And I actually, let me correct myself, because I'm reading the release here. Houston's currently negotiating with the following 5 players about their return for 2025. Latif Blessing is on there. Steve Clark, Daniel Steres, Tate Schmidt, Andrew Tarbill. Now, again, Blessing had a good little stretch, but in the end, I don't think he was of Ben Olsen's liking that much, right? Because we saw him in that playoff game. Came on as a substitute and then came off in that game against Seattle.
Right.
Clark, maybe he's got another good year. We'll see. I know people are bagging on him about the penalties. That to me is not a problem. You wouldn't have that problem if you scored during regulation, right? Steres, I think, has been a good contributor. Tate Schmidt, I guess for the right price, but I would have let him walk. Tarbill, he's been a backup, and I guess it's a good option to have on the bench. Aside from the other guys, I mean, you got some guys like Griffin Dorsey, Carrasquilla coming back, Basi, all these guys I'm talking about are under contract. Artur, Ethan Bartlow, Lawrence Anali, who, it sounds like he's going to come back from injury maybe after this, maybe for the second half of next year. Ezequiel Ponce, Nelson Quiñones, we'll see. Brooklyn Reigns. And then Sviatchenko. We still don't know what Valverde is. So I do think there is a lot of question marks. And again, what is the measure of success? I think that's the big question, right? And for you, all of you that are listening, you can add Soccer Tejas, find us on Twitter, wherever. Maybe you can tell us. But to me, what is the measure of success? Is it just making the playoffs? If it is, then maybe they got a good enough roster to get there. And that's what they're going to go by, right? And they're going to, I'm sure, if and when they make it, look, 3 years in a row in the playoffs, and again, because the bar is so low before, that's going to get touted. But if we're talking about putting an MLS Cup contender, you had a window with Hector Herrera, and you missed it, and you closed it. And I get it. Part of it was maybe his fault, but where's your next window? And what are you going to do if you're truly serious about winning an MLS Cup? And that's up still for them to prove.
It's still it's still to be defined. It's still to be determined what exactly happens with the team. We're talking the Houston Dynamo and the end of the Hector Herrera era. We're talking a team that was bounced out in the first round of the MLS playoffs, and that makes us transition to another team that now has definitely upset the MLS because I'm almost certain they wanted Miami and Messi to go on. Let's first talk about the match itself. What a tremendous game in Florida, and the way Atlanta played that match. That's one of the most entertaining matches that I've watched. Laura, Messi tried, couldn't put it together. Brad Goosen shining in goal, the 40-year-old. I like veterans, by the way. But what a way for Atlanta to have won the series and bounced Miami. Let's talk about the game itself first. Tremendous, Laura, and I'm sure that so many are surprised by this, especially when everybody, MLS wanted, Apple TV wanted for Miami to be successful.
I mean, there was a huge difference of just the standings between what the end of the season was for Miami. I think it was like 72, 73, and I think for Atlanta it was like 40 something. So it was a huge difference of where they ended up in their standings. And, you know, having a superstar name like Messi, automatically people are going to bet their money on it. So to me, remember when I said in the last, I think, podcast, I said, good, I hope they lose, because it would be amazing to see an upset and to see like one of the wild cards like Atlanta beat them. And that's what they did. I think that maybe the team was into their head too much, the pressure of all the media, because the media was like already giving them the win. I mean, there's a lot of things that were going on, but a team that is so bulked up with so many talented players and they don't advance like that, that has to be, I mean, things have to be rearranged. They need to see what's going on, because if you have everything that you could want and you can't beat a team that was very winnable on paper, something's going on. So it was a good match. I was exciting watching, kind of like, what's that saying? See, I have really bad memory, my age. You like people that's old. I'm older. What is it? Goliath and
David and Goliath.
Yes. David and Goliath.
Yes.
That's what that match was for me.
Victor, what I saw in that match, again, and we can discuss the format or whether or not a supporter shield team should have to even play in the first round. Everyone knew the format. Everyone knew what was supposed to happen to make it exciting, to get the ratings going. But I did see a couple of things that troubled me. From Miami, number one, this is a team that's got the South American style of what can I get away with? How much can I cheat? This is me, Alex Parra, saying this. Suarez, to me, is one of the dirtiest players in the history of the sport. He deserved it. And because one of their players pretended to fall down and ask for play to stop, that's how Atlanta finished the play and scored the winning goal. Miami could have controlled that, but it was their culture of complaining, their culture of cheating, in my opinion, that facilitated this situation. Nobody's addressed that much. Nobody likes to criticize Miami and the team they're building because MLS doesn't want anybody talking about this. But Suarez was dirty. Messi, I don't want to say was dirty, but he was protected at times by the referees. I almost thought the referees were going to do anything possible to make it a tie again and go to penalty kicks. That's how much I think MLS wanted this to happen. But the winning goal, which was a beautiful header, Victor, in my opinion, Miami laid down. They stopped playing. Shame on them for not playing by the rules because they were trying to get away with something. Am I crazy, Victor?
No, I think faith has been restored in the MLS playoff system. But, you know, here's the irony. This best of three comes about with the Apple TV deal, right, to get a more inventory of games. So this is what they get. It was a stupid format to begin with. I think everybody criticized it. It defies the logic of the sport. And now you don't get the prize cow going all the way to the final, right? But here is the beauty of having the Messis and the Suarez and the Jordi Alba and the Sergio Busquets in MLS. It raises the level of competition. Look how much Atlanta came into its own, right, in this playoff series over the 3 games. And maybe they'll get eliminated in the next round. Who knows? But for those 3 games, they raised their level. Brad Goosen raised his level so much. People were talking about, hey, does he deserve a nod back into the U.S. national team picture? I mean, those kinds of things, right? And this is why we need star players in this league to lift, to be the rising tide that lifts all ships. But unfortunately, the other side of the coin is this is going to be the proof for the, I'm not going to name names, but for the cheap teams in the league to say, you
Dynamo,
see,
say him,
you don't need a
Victor,
lot.
say
You
him.
don't need a Messi. You don't need a Messi to win it all.
Sure. Sure. You need conviction. You need focus. Yes, you need the right time in the right place. So definitely an upset. Laura, I'm going to give you this comment. What happens to Apple TV? I know you're not one of the
I'm not.
They're not one of your favorites, I should say. But this certainly has to hurt. Victor and I were texting immediately after the match, and Victor, quote, there goes the international audience. I think there goes the audience, period, for what's left of the playoffs. Now that Messi's out, what happens? And does the MLS have to reevaluate how they get this product to the consumer now? Because people aren't going to pay attention if it isn't Messi. They're going to say, Brad Goosen who?
I mean, I think it does well. I think it does well to have those matchups and have those international names like Victor mentioned. It does bring up a lot of the level of other teams as well. But I did want to mention what you're saying. The Dynamo can say, oh, look at Atlanta, they did it. Yeah, but the culture is different. What they've done throughout the years, this is something that they've done throughout the years, kind of surprise, and it's not something new to them. So the culture is completely different from the culture of what's been going on in the Dynamo. I think that even if Messi and Miami's gone, I think that people might be interested. People that love soccer are going to be interested maybe in following Atlanta and seeing what they do or how far they go or who they beat if they took out the best quote unquote team of the MLS. So I don't think necessarily everyone's going to leave. Yeah, there's going to be some, casual watchers that just want to see Messi and watch him play. But if you love football, you're going to watch it. If you love soccer, you're going to want to keep watching it and see what really goes on. So it's interesting to see. Yeah, did Apple lose like their big, their golden, I guess like golden goose egg or something like that, the saying? Perhaps, yeah. But I think that it also might attract others that were watching the game just for Messi to watch Atlanta keep going to the end if they make it.
Victor, the loss of Messi affects Apple TV. I think it affects the MLS product. Does this get us closer to a last chance for Messi? Because I believe he's got 1 year left in the contract, which would be 2025. Is this another Hector Herrera situation where, listen, we brought him in, we sold a bunch of jerseys on the field. What are we doing? Is there a shakeup now necessary before next season for Miami, or this was just a bad moment? Don't worry, they're going to win next year. Meaning, was this the window?
They don't care. They don't care if they win. They're already making those big bucks.
They still have another year, right? And God forbid he doesn't get injured, and there goes the interest in the entire year. But 2025 will be interesting because they'll be again in the Champions Cup to start the year. So the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So maybe there's a chance there to win a trophy. That would be a big one to win, regardless of maybe the Club World Cup format has been a little bit different. Speaking of the Club World Cup, they'll be playing in that expanded 32 team format. They'll be the host. They'll be the opening game, if I'm not mistaken. So that'll be another thing that'll bring eyeballs to FIFA, obviously, but also to the United States, to MLS. And then we'll see how they finish off the year, because now it definitely gives a different storyline. And look, I think he might even hang around a little bit more because it is a little bit different than the Herrera situation. Miami's trying to open a new stadium closer to downtown, right? And I think they'd like to have Messi there for that. So I think there's still a little bit bigger of a window here. And look, we've already heard talk about Neymar, other stars. Who knows if the league changes some of the rules this offseason, right, to allow more spending. And again, just his elimination alone and Miami's is headlines across the world for this league. Attention that MLS wouldn't be getting otherwise.
I agree with that. Speaking of the playoffs, we're looking at the bracket now, guys. So it looks like in the West, LAFC is taking on Seattle. The other team from LA, the Galaxy, taking on Minnesota. A bit of a surprise there a little bit. And then, of course, Orlando taking on Atlanta, the huge surprise there. and New York City taking on Red Bull New York. So kind of a regional battle there. As we look, Laura, at what's left of the playoffs, what are your picks? I guess the West might be the strongest. LAFC, to me, Seattle, whoever wins that series may be, in my opinion, at least one of the favorites. Your thoughts, Laura, on the playoffs?
I mean, I guess in the perfect world, perhaps people would love to see LAFC against LA Galaxy, but I'm rooting for Minnesota. I know that they've had
No,
really good. Yes, they've
no.
had really good.
Balloons.
Yes, they've had really good past batches of like
You were
beating
just saying that
bigger
the Dynamo
teams.
just
Hold
getting
on,
to the playoffs
Let me
with the
finish. Let
roster
me
that they
finish.
have, it would
But
be
we
a horrible
can't
story. But now
compare.
you're
We
rooting for
can't
Minnesota,
compare.
which is that.
No, let's not compare that. The thing is, it has worked in the past for Minnesota. It has worked in the past for Atlanta. It has not worked for the Dynamo. They need to try a different strategy. So let's not put every team in the same bracket of they can't have a team with no superstars and make it to the end, because that was something that the Dynamo had done in the past. Those Dynamos that won those championships back then, they didn't have huge names, but they had grit and they had hustle.
I disagree.
But these new teams don't have that. Well, let me finish. I don't care if you disagree. Let me finish what I'm saying. Look, I want Minnesota to win. I want them to go to the conference final. I think that it'll be interesting to see. And again, I wouldn't put them in the same bracket as the Dynamo, the Dynamo and all these teams that don't have super names. Now, you can talk now, Victor. Why do you disagree with me?
I do think they had some names. I think they had Brian Ching, Dwayne De Rosario.
But you're gonna say
Pat
like
Onstad.
huge names?
I think for what MLS was at the time, yes. For what MLS was at the time, and to have all those guys,
yes.
I think, yeah,
At the
I think
time,
it was. And maybe they don't get the love that they should, but because they're probably more humble players that don't kind of seek that spotlight as much. But I do think because I hear that as an excuse a lot, but people say that
not huge names,
those teams were a
but
lot
people
of
that didn't. No, but perhaps names that not people out of the MLS knew. So I'll change to what I said to that, because those players that you mentioned were amazing players. Let's just say that they weren't well known for the people that didn't watch the MLS, perhaps.
And I only mention it because I think people, especially revisionist history, right? People try to go to those teams and act like it was just all grit. They had talent too, and I think people forget that.
I don't forget that.
The talent was there.
Well, you were there, Alex.
Yeah, I was there. I was there. By the way, I love watching you two going at it, so maybe that should be the show. Let me finish. No, let me finish. Definitely, it's emotional, and we'll see what happens with the playoffs. Victor, do you think Atlanta has it in them? Is there a destiny here, or do you think they're spent?
They had nothing to lose. So yeah, we'll see what they're made of. I think they certainly have a couple of talented players. Listen, the other thing too is, and this is why I got disappointed with the way the Dynamo go about their season and just don't have a more balanced team, because I think if they just had the goals to go along with it, I mean, look at if there was ever a year to make a run with that style, Miami's out. Columbus, the reigning champions, are out. I didn't think FC Cincinnati was that great this year, but they're out, right? They were one of the top 5 teams in the Supporters Shield. Look, it's free range for anybody in the East who wants to make it all the way to the final. I know Orlando's probably the maybe more polished team, but I think it really could be any one of those 4. The other 2 New York teams are there. LAFC doesn't look all that strong, so had the Dynamo advance. I know it's coulda, shoulda, woulda. I mean, you're talking about that team might be ready for the pickings. And LA, the Galaxy are the only ones that I think after that loss in Houston, that really kind of lit a fire under them. And we may be seeing an inspired Galaxy, but God forbid Minnesota beats them, man. that would be so MLS.
I hope they do.
talking a little bit about the MLS and more than a little bit, almost most of the show devoted to the end of the Hector Herrera era, also talking about Messi and company getting bounced out of the MLS playoffs. Let's quickly, Laura, go to the NWSL, the playoff format. I love, by the way, they're getting games done quickly, and 4 games played this past weekend in which really not any major surprises. Kansas City looking strong, Orlando looking strong. In general
Super
terms, so far sticking to the script, and I like that we'll have basically semifinals and a final. 3 matches left. How do you see things in the NWSL playoffs?
I really would want to see Orlando Pride be the ones that kind of like, make it to the end. Again, I've always been a big admirer of Marta and her style and what she's done in Orlando Pride. And they do have a lot of talent as well. They have many other players. So I think that's one of the ones that I'm rooting for. Gotham has had really an amazing year as well. Washington Spirit has been one that has gotten better from, last season. So that's also valid. It's interesting. I think that this playoff is kind of equal. I think that there's a lot of growth in a lot of the players, and I think that adding more teams has kind of made it a little bit more competitive and more exciting to watch. So I think it's good. It's good to see what's going to happen. What's going to happen next? Let's see.
Next, speaking of it, as I'm looking at my details here, Washington taking on New York, New Jersey, Gotham, and Orlando taking on Kansas City. By the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, those were the teams that finished 1, 2, 3, 4 in the regular season. So unlike a surprise with Miami, correct me if I'm wrong, the teams that are left in the semifinals were the 1, 2, 3, 4. Help me with that so I don't get it wrong and someone
You know why, Alex?
nails me.
You know why?
They are.
Because they don't have this crazy best of 3 series.
Yes.
No, you're right. And you can watch a lot of the games for free. You don't have to watch them in other places that are not.
It's Apple TV's fault. That's the problem.
I blame them. But yes, Alex, you're right. Orlando's in first place.
The NWSL has like
Washington,
4 paywalls.
Listen, second place, Washington Spirit. Third place, Gotham. Fourth, Current, KC Current. And fifth was North Carolina.
So there you go. But I love the format. We'll have let's see, both semifinals coming up this weekend, the 16th and 17th, and then the final the weekend after that. If I'm not mistaken on the schedule,
On the 23rd.
Victor, I love the movement. I love the focus in a crowded sports calendar with college football, with professional football. I believe the games, some of them were on Sunday on ABC nationwide. I was happy to see that. I didn't watch every minute, but certainly watching a bit here and there as I flipped to American college football.
And I was just joking there. They don't have all these paywalls. It's really, I think Prime Video might be the one, and anything on ESPN is probably the only thing that you probably need some subscription for. But I give them props because they have a local TV deal with the ION channel, and like you said, some of these games on ABC, CBS. Certainly different NWSL than what it used to be, a lot more accessible. But the one thing I'll just add there, Kansas City seems to be like, it's kind of written for them. I know they're the lowest of the teams remaining, but they got the championship game, so that's probably a big motivation for them.
That's at home, yeah.
Forgive me, Laura, for interrupting you. A quick note on the NWSL out of the dash. Heather Hinz, who was the backup goalkeeper for the Dash most of the season, I think she played 1 or 2 matches. She has now been transferred, traded. Help me with the language, Victor. To make sure loaned out to the team from Fort Lauderdale in the USL
Super League. So basically, Super League, right? For the off season, during the NWSL off season, she'll be playing in the USL, and they can actually call her back early if they need her in for preseason.
And Victor, do you think that opens up a cooperation between these 2 leagues, which then again talks about not competing against each other, but helping each other, giving players opportunities, and both helping to raise the standard? I think, Laura, you talked about this, Laura. More opportunity is good for women's soccer players.
Yes, I agree. I think that the USL, it's competition, but the games aren't really at the same time, so they're different. more than competition, I really do see it as growing the sport and having more women that want to play professionally be able to do that, and also have players that need to grow more, like Hinge, or players that perhaps are injured. They go to the USL teams and are able to get back on track and then come back to the NWSL, and go from the USL to the NWSL and go back and forth. I think that's really something amazing, because it really does foment the growth of professional soccer for women, which is something that women have always suffered of, like, the NWSL prior, had fallen, there wasn't funds, and, just other things that weren't going right. So being able to have like a second professional league is something that is amazing and strives forward to really making these leagues strong for women.
Victor, do you see it
So
the
it's
same
and
way?
it's a different calendar too. We got to remember that. So that's why it allows
Yes,
players to play there in the off season. Let's remember, a lot of these players used to go overseas,
exactly.
Australia or Europe, right,
Spain.
during the off season to try to get more games. Now you stay within the country. It's easier to keep an eye on. Same time zone. I think the games are on Peacock, so that's a paywall, but still you're able to watch the games.
No,
And
Peacock can be free if you already have certain channels. Please, my
If
oh,
people,
there you
check this
go.
if
out.
you already paid.
Or if you have
Yes.
like, yeah. But look, the only thing I'll say is this: the Dash were already eliminated from the playoffs, right? I don't see why Hints couldn't have gotten more NWSL experience in this final stretch. Maybe Ricky Clark was trying to get a couple wins, whether he was trying to get the job or whether it was all about trying to send the team off with a little bit more of a better taste in their mouth, as far as if they can get a couple of victories. But I thought, certainly because we called that last game, it was a little bit odd to see her play that final game when she could have really been getting some minutes. Again, NWSL experience, which, whatever you may think, still the top league in the United States, right? And so that was my only thing about that, where now you're sending her to the USO, and obviously she should be expected to get minutes. But in the end, what does she come back to? Jane Campbell is probably going to still be the number one, and that's the only question mark.
Well,
But it's
see.
Maybe you're
growth. I
shopping
think
her
that
around.
I think that the games that we did see her play, I think she did very well. I think she's very secure of herself, even having played,
Yeah.
a
But she
small
played
amount
in
of
the Summer
time. I think
Cup.
she has potential.
Yeah.
She has
So-
potential. I really like her. I think that she has a lot of potential.
And I think it's good that she recognizes, you know what, the more I play, the better it is for me, and why not have all parties involved facilitate this loan. So we'll see the future of Heather Hinz relative to not only the USL Super League, but also the NWSL and the Dash. Sticking with the women's game, just today, and we tape on Mondays, the NCAA Division I have finalized their end-of-season tournament after having several matches played, conference matches played over the weekend at all levels, by the way, not only Division I. And I wanted us, Victor, to talk a little bit about the teams from Texas, and we'll have a graphic here shortly. 4 teams from Texas are in the actual tournament itself. But let's talk about the Longhorns, who found a way to, in their first season in the SEC, Victor, to win and the SEC tournament over the weekend. A great finish for a tremendous Longhorn team that's doing it all this season.
Yeah, different conference, different setting, I think brings reinvigorated Texas Longhorns team, right? I believe the second conference championship under Angela Kelly for the Longhorns. So I did think they had gotten a bit, not meeting expectations, right? In the Big 12, I think I would have liked to have seen them compete for more national championships.
Sure.
For one reason or another. I don't know why it didn't happen. They always have talented players coming through there. Maybe now being in a different conference and certainly what the SEC means, maybe not in soccer, but just all in overall college sports, maybe that has changed things, and we'll see if they can make a title run.
I know that Lexi Missima, who scored the goal, by the way, against South Carolina, is one of those special players. A player already from the Longhorns has signed with the Trinity Buyers, if I'm not mistaken, has signed with the NWSL. So you can see the quality of players they have. I believe the Longhorns, Victor, can make a run here in the tournament, and we'll talk shortly about their first round matchup in Austin. But without a doubt, you're seeing the quality of this school and also the investment that this school has when it comes relative to the sport of soccer. I've witnessed it firsthand, and I think it's tremendous. I guess the question now, Laura, is beyond what they have already done. A national championship at Texas would be something that would be really immortalizing Coach Kelly and also that program. It's a program that has a lot of support, continues to grow, continues to find players. And Laura, I guess it's a team that has potential destiny in front of it.
Yeah, and I think that it's very good to have more attention to other teams besides the Dash. And I know it's, the Texas Longhorns aren't a professional team, but just soccer for women in general.
Right.
It's good to have different headlines for women specifically for the sport. I think that really puts an attention specifically for Texas, and anything that women for soccer can get in Texas, I think that it's good and it makes it grow, which leads into investing more, which leads into more, quality equipment, players, coaches, and everything else. So I think that it's all kind of just connected in itself, really, for women in Texas and in the soccer level that is probably going to grow because of this.
Let's switch. Yeah, go ahead.
I would argue that it might even be more professional in a certain sense because of the NIL, or you're now players being able to get some compensation, right? But also when it's always been astounding to me, and especially with the NWSL where it was in previous years, that you get players at some of these universities with crazy resources like Texas, right? And then to come to the NWSL and some of the facilities, and I think that's still where the league maybe has to catch up. It almost, for some of them,
it's a downgrade.
Might have been a downgrade. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it almost seems, especially, and now with the SEC schools, with the way everybody's just, the trickle down from the football programs. But so there is that, and that's where I think maybe the NWSL still has to raise their game a little bit, but. Going back to Byers, I'm a little bit disappointed, and we don't know the entire story, but I'm a little more disappointed. The Dash, they didn't get it right, especially where they're at. Listen, if it's now open free range and you can go out and spend, go do it. Get the top stars from the Longhorns, get the top stars from A&M, from local colleges, and start making the Dash a little bit more of a community team in that sense as well, while you're also improving the soccer product.
Before we look at the 4 teams that have made the NCAA tournament, Div 1 on the women's side, let's talk a little bit about Stephen F. Austin, Victor, as well, a team that's qualified, a team that's consistently had talent from the Houston area attend. But as we roll some highlights, talk to us about this team getting to the tournament.
Yeah, getting the championship, right? They're at the end with 2 goals. To finally break a deadlock, and I gotta say, some wrestling fans will catch this. The AEW belt at the end that surprised me a little bit, but yeah, let's show SFA some love. Texas aren't the only team that won their conference, and I know it's a little bit of a different level in media attention, but it's good to see other Texas schools there. I believe TCU also made it. You probably got that list.
Yes, sir, I do. So let's stand by for that, and we'll roll then the graphic, and we'll put it on screen now. So we have the 4 teams from Texas that have qualified. They're playing their first round match, as you can see, coming up on November 15th. It'll be Boston visiting Texas with the 4th seed. You can see the records there. Then Stephen F. Austin, they have the duty to go play against TCU, who are 16-3-2, but SFA, as you can see, 14-3-2 this season. And then LSU visiting Lubbock, taking on Texas Tech with a record Tech this season of 14-4-2. By the way, all of them trying to get through the first round. Eventually, everyone trying to get through the College Cup, which will be played December 6th, semifinals, and December 9th, the finals. So they're a little bit of an idea of the 4 teams from Texas that are in the the NCAA Women's Division I end of season tournament. Victor, do you like the format that you get through your conference? Of course, then that guarantees you a spot. I'm going to be honest with you when I say this. I expect some blowouts as I'm looking here at my details. There's some conferences that, man, I don't know if they deserve to be there because they're just not at that level. And you can see the difference between a team in the Big 12 and the SEC in the Big 10 and other teams. I'm going to leave it at that just simply, even by winning their conference, I don't want to poo-poo on a Morehead State, but that would be a long shot to me for them to get past round one. And often what we've seen in the past couple of years, Victor and Lauda, are blowouts in that first round. Is that right? Is that fair? Should it be treated like the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament? You get in, Cinderella story, anything can happen, Victor? Is this a good format?
Look, 64 teams, that's a bunch, but it is, we are talking about the entire nation. So, and I do think there is some merit, obviously, for the conference champions to get in that way. I think I'm fine with it emulating the other college sports. The only thing I wish they had, and this is probably a deeper conversation, is just the scheduling where the games weren't so crunched together, right? Just for the development of players and development of the sports. But otherwise, I think I'm fine with the format because it does allow for that tournament style, like the basketball tournament.
Laura, same question to you. Are you happy with the tournament? Is this the best way to decide a national champion versus a 2 out of 3 series like the MLS?
I do think that the blowout might be something that might be painful for the losing team, but at the end of the day, it reminds me of kind of like the Gold Cup. I mean, you have teams that are flying, and there's teams that don't even have a stadium.
Sure.
So it's just kind of the law of it, but it also makes those other teams that perhaps don't have that much experience to want to do more with what they have. So it's just making them grow in their soccer level and not trying to maintain them at a lower level, but knowing that there's a higher level, perhaps they can get there too. So I think it's a good experience.
So we'll be keeping up with the way the tournament continues on the women's side. Next Monday, the men's the tournament draw will be shared publicly, so we'll have a better idea then. Victor, you were going to say something, sir.
No, I was, the thing too is you look at college football, right? And they keep expanding the playoff because, it used to be the top 2 ranked teams, right? And then now it's like, well, more teams deserve, one more team deserves to get in and one more team. With 64 teams, I don't think there's a doubt. All right. So
Sure.
Enough teams get in so you can decide it and see who's the best.
Who's the best? Certainly plenty of opportunity there. And I'm glad that we're talking about women's college sports. I'm glad we're talking about women's soccer. And you mentioned this a few minutes ago. Often big-time college programs, the North Carolinas of the world, the UCLAs, the Texas Longhorns of the world, these are world-class facilities. These are world-class private jets.
They don't envy anybody.
No, private jets flying the student athletes back and forth to games, NIL, all kinds of incentives. The level of Div 1 women's soccer in this country is higher in some cases than professional teams throughout the world. So no, often I would doubt maybe that some of these college athletes, women's college soccer players, may be taking a step down to turn quote unquote professional, because I think professionalism is already at the level of some of these schools. So we'll dig into that a little bit more because the landscape continues to change. As we wrap up today, let's talk about what's on our mind. And Victor, we'll start with you. What are you thinking about here in this week now that we continue MLS playoffs, NWSL semifinals? What's on your mind, Victor Araiza?
I'll give a shout out to a team that's crossing the Texas border, FC Juarez Femenil, Liga MX. The women's league is having their playoffs currently, and while I believe Pachuca went through, right? Juarez didn't necessarily have the result they wanted. The first leg was certainly something to see as far as attendance. I tuned in for a bit of it, and I have to tell you, they were trying to beat their previous record for attendance. I believe they were on a good run of home games. I owe you the record. We'll have it on the website if they cross the 11,000 mark. But to see that many people, especially compared to the attention or the lack of attendance for the men's team in Liga MX, that was refreshing to see. That was good to see for FC Juárez Femenil getting some attendance in Ciudad Juárez.
I like that. Laura, what's on your mind as we begin this week and you look to the wide world of soccer in our world?
I mean, as always, I think that I'm concentrating in women's sports, whether it's watching it or trying to find something to write about. I was watching some highlights of the Women's Super League in England, and I was watching some of the highlights of Liverpool versus Chelsea, and they have a lot of games coming up. So if you guys say that there's no women's sports, pro sports going on, you're wrong. You just have to look for them. So, I mean, it's exciting, honestly, to see the different talents and the way that they play in different parts, not just the NWSL.
I have two things on my mind. Number one, kind of piggybacking off your comments, Laura, I think we should all be supportive if we love the sport of what's going on in the NWSL right now. A couple of matches to watch, certainly worth it. Also, NCAA and different other conferences playing at the college level. Support women's sports that way. What's coming up is going to be very exciting and high quality, by the way. And by the way, if you have daughters that one day want to play soccer and get to the college level, be aware that there really is quality. So also be realistic about that. But my big complaint this week is two things that we've watched in the last couple of weeks in the MLS. One of them is Hector Herrera. To me, it was a shame the way he went out, the shame that he lost control and turned around and spit toward a referee. To me, that's an example of not thinking, and not only thinking short term, Victor and Laura and friends, but thinking about the consequences. I can bet you now that some young player this weekend, next weekend, in the next year will react the same way and justify it by saying, if Hector Herrera, can do that, why can't I? Luis Suarez playing for Miami, same thing. What can I get away with? What can I do to cheat the system? And justifying it as a competitive edge. To me, that's wrong. And to me, that's sending the wrong message. That's obvious. That's clear to the next generation who will just continue to use it. We talk about getting rid of racism. We talk about getting rid of mistreatment of any minority group. Soccer has a problem. They have to change the attitudes. And I'm glad, and this, I know I'm going to take a lot of heat for this, that Hector Herrera was ejected after that match. MLS deserves to have come down hard on him beyond the red card with a fine. What I am not happy with, and I bet you behind the scenes it happened, and Pat Onstead, Victor, alluded to this. I'm sure behind the scenes they were mad at him for an opportunity missed, and Pat said it. We do not condone this type of behavior. That's owning it and not publicly shaming him, which to me might have been the next step. We all commit mistakes. Trust me, as a player, as a coach, I've been awful, and I deserve everything I receive from that. But the message that's sending to the next generation is awful. So there you go. I got it off my chest. Pass me my little pills. I feel better. As we wrap up, Laura, some last comments here before we wrap up the Soccer Tejas podcast.
I just want to say power to women. That's it.
That's it. And we'll talk about the election and other things next time? Or you rather talk about the holidays?
We'll see what's going on and how many Hallmark movies I'm in when you want to talk about politics.
That's right. Victor, some last words to close out the podcast, please, sir.
No, I agree with everything you said. I hope they make a statement, the Dynamo, about the discipline of the team. Hey, listen, they need a talking to also the Carrasquilla. I still say Olsen needs to tone it down as well with the refs. So hopefully, sign of things to come.
sign of things to come. Well, we're hoping that we'll be back next week on another edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast. We can't thank all of you enough. Number one, for following us, for your questions, your interactions. Find us on social media. So on behalf of our entire production team, on behalf of Laura Gomez, on behalf of Hector Herrera, I'm Alex Parra. Thanks to all of you, friends, for finding us here. This is what we call the Soccer Tejas podcast. Until next time.